Black Crusade.
178 years after the slaughter at Castle-Tyne, Abaddon returned to blight the worlds of the Imperium once again. The Sixth Black Crusade would smash against Imperial defences at a moment of great internecine turmoil. Yet not all was well within the Eye of Terror either. Despite his standing as Warmaster, not every Chaos warband respected the Despoiler, and many rivals arose to challenge his position through the years. The Sixth Black Crusade would thus be far smaller in scale to the previous 5, and its aim much less ambitious. This time, Abaddon would bring hell into the Materium in the pursuit of one man's death. Meanwhile, in Westeros, a single death can also change the course of history, something well known to those caught in its chaos.
But yeah, this
chaos
game...
we now invite you to join via our sponsor, Game of Thrones King's Road. This is a new action-adventure RPG set in a richly recreated Westeros, and it's official, with all the locations and characters you know from the TV series. It's an open-world adventure across the fractured continent, in which you'll be building your name and legend through exploration, meeting the many great names of the era, and intense detailed combat. Fight as a knight with precise and calculated attacks, as a sellsword with rugged, destructive aggression, or as an assassin with pure skill and agility. Dodge and counter enemies, learn their patterns, and build out a customizable skill set and gear setup to make your character your own. You can also team up in multiplayer for intense fights against powerful creatures, which, as you can see, leads to epic boss encounters sure to test your skill and build your reputation in Westeros. The game is free to play without any pay-to-win mechanics, and it's coming out on both PC and mobile devices.
Thing, but
it's crossplay
in the books, I know there's a lot more stuff than was shown in the show.
Game across any of them all at once, with classic characters to meet, epic combat to master, and a brand new open world to explore. Game of Thrones King's Road is certainly worth a try. Pre-register now and get early access to the game by following our link in the description. The Sixth Black Crusade erupted in 901 M36, emerging in the dark hours of an Imperium already severely weakened. The Age of Apostasy had left mankind divided and vulnerable, setting brother against brother in the worst schism since the Horus Heresy. The monstrous reign of Mad Joge Vandaya had sown chaos and tyranny across the Emperor's realm. Through cunning and absolute ruthlessness, Vandaya had become the first man to hold absolute control over the Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy. In the span of a few short years, his sway over the Imperium was absolute, turning him into the most powerful mortal man to have ever lived. Yet despite his undeniable strength of character, no single unaugmented human could ever hope to rule over a galactic empire like the Emperor once had. Thus, Vandaya's already unstable sanity soon unraveled under the strain of managing close to 1 million inhabited realms. The long dark years of his reign would come to be known as the Reign of Blood, and is regarded as one of the darkest chapters of Imperial history.
Sheesh.
No one was safe from Vandaya's tyranny and religious delusions, and in the span of a few centuries, the insane High Lord would damage the Imperium almost as much as Abaddon himself had. His execution at the hands of Alicia Dominica, the founder of the Adepta Sororitas, would bring some solace across the stars, but the damage was too great. Not long after Vandaya's death, a new destructive era would ensue as a direct result of his reign. The Plague of Unbelief soon began, fracturing the Imperium into yet more warring factions. Civil war spread everywhere, with entire planetary sectors declaring independence or falling into ruin. Where once the light of the Emperor had burned fiercely, now only anarchy and heresy remained.
And this is why Guilliman came back and wiped out most of the rebellions, took control, and said, "Hey, High Lords, yeah, no more for you." Guilliman.
It was therefore no wonder that Chaos chose this moment to attack. The forces of Chaos, long confined to the Eye of Terror, saw their opportunity. Hundreds of lesser warbands, led by petty chiefs, poured forth, striking out against the weakened domains of the Emperor in pursuit of plunder, vengeance, and conquest. For many of them, it was a great opportunity to replenish their stockpiles. Most traitor warbands suffered from terrible supply shortages within the Eye. Dark Mechanicus forges were rare, and only the strongest warbands, like the Black Legion, had control over them. Everyone else would either have to barter from a position of weakness or reave across the galaxy in search of loot. Now the second option had suddenly become much easier. Not one to sit on the sidelines, Abaddon also stirred his forces for war. Unlike the lesser lords of chaos, content with pillage, Abaddon's aims were more subtle. He sought greater dominion over chaos itself, yet to secure his rule, he first had to eliminate his rivals. Darovec had been slain centuries ago during the First Black Crusade, and Talamin had also fallen during the Third. Since then, countless other rivals and obstacles had met their end at the War Master's hand. Yet strength invites challenge, and chaos is ever self-destructive. New foes appeared at every
Self-destructive
turn,
is an understatement.
the Chaos Gods delighting in testing and proving their rebellious and insolent champion. Chief among them was Abaddon's former brother, Drakarth the Sightless, the blind butcher of Aridus 7. Drakarth had once been an unremarkable captain of the Lunar Wolves, and later the Sons of Horus, during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. But after the fall of their Primarch, he had forged his own destiny. Refusing to kneel before Abaddon or his Black Legion, he had led his warriors, the Sons of the Eye, into the Immaterium. From there they emerged sporadically over centuries to wage war on both loyalists and traitor alike.
It sounds like
many
he
other
gonna
splinter
die.
warbands that had fallen into decay or mindless
He
bloodshed,
gonna die.
the Sons of the Eye flourished under his rule. They were disciplined, resourceful, and feared. They were also bitter rivals of Abaddon. The Sons of the Eye belonged to the thrice-cursed traitors, a loose confederation of warbands that clung to the old ways of the Legion, like Darovec once had. They refused, one and all, to acknowledge Abaddon as their war master. They had once hunted him relentlessly, viewing him as a usurper unworthy of Horus's mantle. Now, however, the tide had turned. Abaddon's Black Legion was ascendant, and the thrice-cursed traitors had become a fading force. Yet Drakarth and his warriors were still defiantly independent. Their iconography, a mutilated Eye of Horus, slashed through to signify their Gene-Father's failures, spoke
They
to their
holding
beliefs.
books?
They despised Abaddon for what they saw as his arrogance and blindness, mirroring the faults that had doomed Horus himself. Still, the Sons of the Eye prospered under Drakarth's command. The Black Legion certainly eclipsed them in strength and manpower, but their own forces and leadership were strong enough to deter open war between the two factions. The inevitable result of a conflict between Drakarth and Abaddon would be the destruction of one warband and the fatal weakening of the other. Drakarth had proven himself a formidable, cunning, and relentless warlord. Slowly but surely, he had battled his way to the top, carving a name for himself alongside his more famous brothers from the Heresy. His hour of glory had been the bloody triumph at the Battle of the Keening Deep. There, Drakarth's reputation had been cemented, and his star had risen to new heights, to the point of threatening more established captains and warlords. The fortress of the Keening Deep lay within the folds of the Eye of Terror. It was the stronghold of a mighty Khornite warband that had taken refuge within its walls after the sundering of the World Eater's Legion. Drakarth thus decided to attack the fortress head-on, keen on proving his martial superiority to mortals and gods alike. The World Eaters had the home advantage, and the wrath of the Blood God to fuel their battle lust. Yet the Sons of the Eye were the inheritors of the Lunar Wolves. Drakarth made use of every stratagem his Gene-Father had perfected over centuries of war across the stars, and slowly wrestled control of the keep from his foes. At the height of the battle, Drakarth made his move. His Gene-Father had become famous across the Imperium for his spear-tip tactic, a lightning drop on the enemy's command center to decapitate his leadership. So it was that Drakarth teleported next to the World Eater's warlord. He would meet his foe head-on, like the gladiators of old Nuceria, and best him at his own game. The Berserker was a mighty foe,
Would he?
but rage alone could not overcome Drakarth's ambition. Too long had he lived in obscurity. Too long had he let other figures dictate his life. Too long had he stood by, while the codes of brotherhood and honor he had bled to defend were trampled in the name of rudderless power. Drakarth seized the great demon axe from the Khornate warlord's grasp. With a roar heard by Khorne himself, the son of Horus hefted the weapon and hacked his foe apart for all to see. The remaining berserkers promptly bent the knee to the man who promised to lead them to even greater heights of butchery and bloodletting. The skulls of the defeated Khornate champions had been cast into the soul flames of their own keep in a display of brutal dominance. Yet for all his strength, Drakarth was still a man, and Abaddon had become a master at manipulating the ambitions of his rivals. Drakarth's power was undeniable, but power alone was not enough. For all his strength, he lacked the means to sustain a true war effort. His warband needed weapons, armor, and the machines of war that only the Dark Mechanicum could provide. Yet without access to a corrupted forge world of his own, his forces were reliant on scavenging and plunder. It was a weakness Abaddon had taken note of. Rather than oppose Drakarth's ambitions, the War Master extended a hand in calculated camaraderie. Harkening back to their old days as brother legionnaires, Abaddon proposed a joint assault on Arkrith, a loyalist forge world, teeming with the resources.
Let me guess, he'll just
Drakarth
abandon
so
him down there.
The prize was vast. The manufactorums of the Adeptus Mechanicus held the means to arm entire armies. More than just spoils, this was an opportunity, a test of their shared purpose. If Drakarth agreed, their warbands would fight as one, a reminder of the brotherhood forged long ago in the fires of the Horus heresy. The Sons of the Eye hesitated, wary of Abaddon's true intentions, but the lure of unrestricted war gear was a temptation they could not ignore. Every day, the Black Legion was getting stronger, while their own forces were stagnating. Even if this was a trap, they had little choice but to accept. Sooner or later, both warbands would need to either come to terms or to blows. If the former happened, so much the better. However, if the latter occurred, it made no sense to wait for Abaddon to get even stronger. The campaign was brutal. For months, the combined forces of the Black Legion and the Sons of the Eye laid waste to Arkrith's defenses. The initial assault shattered the outer defenses within days, but the true struggle began in the depths of the Forge World itself. This time, the forces of Chaos were not facing the mortal soldiers of the Imperial Guard, but the implacable hosts of iron and steel of the Omnissiah, Mechanicus legions, their ranks bolstered by Skitarii and battle servitors, fought with grim determination. Their cybernetic
my guess
minds
is they don't
driven
make
by
it.
cold logic and the ruthless directives of the Omnissiah. Every single Skitarii had been mutilated and broken by the priesthood of Mars into a hideous parody of the mortal form. The tech priests' revulsion for mortal flesh had driven them to alter their servants into the image of the machine god. Their legs had been sliced off and replaced with powerful alloy limbs.
In the SCP Foundation, there's a machine god. Wonder if they're taking after that.
That never tired. Their eyelids had been torn off and augmentics grafted over their eyes so that they might always gather data.
But that would be doubtful, considering Warhammer 40k's lore starts way before any SCP stuff.
For blessed Mars. Their lungs had been removed and replaced with rebreathers, allowing them to spread the will of the motive force in any environment. What little remained of their tortured, pallid bodies merged with their augmentics in painful puckered sores where metal met human tissue. In fact, it was often said within the ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus that if such a warrior were to be dissected, traces of nearly all elements known to man would be found in its remains. Yet, with every ounce of flesh torn from their ravaged bodies, the soldiers of the Omnissiah had been turned into lethal killing machines. Their loyalty, discipline, and coordination were second only to the transhuman warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. Furthermore, the emotional suppressors built into their circuitry and brains allowed them to face the horrors of chaos with unrivaled determination. The Mechanicus turned entire districts of their vast forge world into kill zones, unleashing macro volley cannons, radium fusillades, and incendiary phosphor weapons in a desperate attempt to stem the tide. Vats of molten metal were overturned to create lethal pools capable of melting
but any one of those machinists are no match for an Astartes.
Was unleashed upon the foe with devastating effect. Cohorts of battle automata were roused
Titans?
from their slumber to do battle against Chaos Terminators. At the same time, thousands of menials and slaves underwent emergency servitor augmentation and were thrown at the enemy. None of it worked. Against the relentless onslaught of chaos, the best the Mechanicus could do was delay the inevitable. The towering ziggurats of Arkrith, irreplaceable and massive structures, designed with half-forgotten technology to contain the volatile energy of the planet's plasma reactors, became the final battleground. Their spire-like cores pulsed with dangerous energy, casting eerie glows across the battlefield as the Chaos Horde breached their outer defenses. Within the labyrinthine halls of these cathedrals of industry, the battle turned into a war of attrition. Traitor Astartes clashed with cybernetic tech priests in brutal close-quarters combat, chain axes rending through augmetic limbs, and power swords carving through adamantium plating. The once sterile corridors of the Forge World were painted in a mixture of blood and sacred oils, and the dying prayers of the tech priests drowned beneath the roars of the despoilers' warbands. Abaddon and Drakarth fought side by side, as they had in days long past, their blades carving through the foe with devastating efficiency.
But it has
The
come for
Warmaster of
chaos.
Chaos was an unrelenting force,
It's for them
the talon
to
of Horus
betray
shearing
each
through
other.
Skitarii ranks like a scythe through wheat. Each sweep of his accursed sword left only ruin in its wake, a brutal reminder of the first battles of the Long War, when the Black Legion had shaken the foundations of the Imperium itself. Dracath, Lord of the Sons of the Eye, matched his fury with his own ruthless precision, his demon axe crackling with baleful energy as he tore apart the Omnissiah's chosen. His movements were calculated, a dance of death, refined over centuries of warfare, the echoes of his legion's past glories guiding his strikes. He was no mere butcher, but a craftsman of death, a remnant of an age when the 16th Legion had been among the Emperor's finest. During those long months of struggle, they fought not as rivals, but as brothers in arms, a glorious reflection of an age long gone. The battlefields of Arkrith bore witness to their slaughter, their forces advancing side by side in brutal concert. Where Abaddon struck with unrelenting fury, Dracath moved with honed precision, a duelist amidst the carnage. Their blades sang in unison, a grim chorus to the ruin of the Mechanicum's defenders. To the Sons of the Eye, it was a moment of vindication, proof that the blood of the true Lunar Wolves had not been diluted by the treacheries of the past. For warriors like Dracath, who still clung to the old ways instilled in them by their long-lost Genefather, this moment was worth any price to pay. Yet beneath the brotherhood and shared bloodshed, something darker was at play. Even as the battle raged, Abaddon worked in the shadows. He whispered to Dracath's champions, sowing doubt with carefully chosen words, stoking the embers of ambition and mistrust. He did not command or threaten. Such crude methods had their place, but not here. Instead, he offered them power, visions of greater glories, of ascension beyond the chains of their warlord. He reminded them of what they could become, of what they deserved. The Warmaster spoke not as a tyrant, but as a brother, painting images of an empire of their own, where no master would chain their ambitions. Some resisted, bound by loyalty or fear, but others listened, and in listening they began to question. The cracks within the Sons of the Eye began as murmurs, whispered discussions between battles, lingering glances exchanged in the heat of combat, a hesitation before obeying Dracath's command, a moment's consideration where once there had been only instinctive obedience. Then, as Abaddon had planned, the descent festered. Warriors, once bound by oath and blood, began to question their loyalties, to wonder if Dracath's plan of sentimental conservatism was truly their own. Did he lead them to glory, or merely drag them in his wake? Had they followed him out of faith, or merely because there had been no other choice? One by one, the seeds of doubt took root, and as the war raged on, Dracath was becoming the master of a legion already slipping from his grasp. As the final battle drew to a close and Arkrith burned, the warlords gathered to celebrate their triumph. Dracath, blinded by nostalgia and drunk on victory, had failed to see the trap laid at his feet. As he stood shoulder to shoulder with his Gene brother, their warriors arrayed before them, no doubt the former Lunar Wolf thought of the triumph at Ulanor. There, the ideals of the Great Crusade had burned brighter than ever. There, the Lunar Wolves and their Primarch Horus had been honoured more than anyone in the history of the Imperium. There, brothers stood alongside each other in absolute unity, their shared trials and tribulations creating a bond that went unsaid and seemed so unbreakable. It was then that Abaddon struck. In one swift motion, he turned upon Dracath, impaling him upon the talon of Horus. The massive lightning claw tore through ceramite and flesh, lifting the sightless one from the ground in a gruesome display of dominance. Dracath did not die immediately. He hung there, bleeding, his lifeblood pooling at his feet, as his warriors, his sworn brothers, knelt before Abaddon. One by one, they pledged their allegiance, their oaths of loyalty drowning out Dracath's gasping breaths. The last thing he saw before death claimed him was the total submission of his once proud warband and the destruction of his ideals. Only then did Abaddon finish the deed, executing him in a violent ritual that cemented his rule and the death of the old ways. The Sixth Black Crusade had accomplished its purpose. Dracath the Sightless was dead, his warband broken, his legacy erased. With the absorption of the Sons of the Eye, Abaddon's Black Legion grew ever stronger, their ranks swelling with new warriors, their arsenals enriched by the spoils of Arkrith. The repercussions of Dracath's death spread far beyond his own warband. The remaining factions of the thrice-cursed traitors, long defiant, now faced a grim choice: bend the knee or be destroyed. Many fled deep into the Eye of Terror, unwilling to suffer Dracath's fate. Others, seeing the inevitability of Abaddon's ascendance, swore fealty, bringing their strength to the Black Legion. With each victory, Abaddon's claim to the title of War Master grew undeniable. Though the Imperium remained largely ignorant of the Sixth Black Crusade's significance, its consequences would ripple through history. It was not just a battle, it was a statement. Abaddon had proven once again that resistance was futile, that he would suffer no rivals, that his
"We are Borg. Resistance is futile." So many classic lines from so many sci-fi shows just carry over from other things.
rule over the forces of chaos was absolute. And as the fires of Arcreath smoldered, the galaxy braced for the wars yet to come. To see how those wars unfold, make sure you are subscribed and have
Still,
pressed
to
the bell
stab him
button
so
to see them.
quickly.
Please consider
Sheesh.
liking, commenting, and
I
sharing.
would have thought he
It
was
helps
Hey there everyone, if you enjoyed this content, like and subscribe, and comment down below. Thanks again.